My name is Natasha, and I will be your host today. If you are new here, welcome. In this channel, we upload episodes every day to help you improve your English listening, speaking, and vocabulary skills. So make sure to stay with us and listen carefully. Today's episode is titled Upper Intermediate Topics and Stories. I'm going to share some useful English phrases and vocabulary with you through stories and examples from daily life. Let's start with something simple but interesting. Imagine you are traveling to another city for work. You check into a hotel and the receptionist says, "Please fill out this registration form." You might respond, "Of course, could you give me a pen?" This shows how polite requests work in English. Politeness is very important when you are dealing with services like hotels, restaurants, or even government offices. I remember once when I traveled to another city for a conference. The receptionist at the hotel told me that my room was not ready yet. Instead of getting upset, I said, "That's all right. Could you suggest a nice cafe nearby where I can wait?" She smiled and gave me directions. Later, when I returned, she upgraded my room because I was patient and polite. This story shows how kindness in communication can bring positive results. Now let's practice another situation. Imagine you are in a business meeting. Your colleague Daniel is giving a presentation, and he says something that you do not fully agree with. Instead of saying, "You are wrong," you can say, "That's an interesting point, but I see it a little differently." This type of phrase is very useful because it shows respect. While sharing your own opinion, I once attended a meeting where a colleague named Sarah presented her ideas about how to improve customer service. I thought her plan was good, but I had another idea. Instead of disagreeing directly, I said, "I like the direction you are going, Sarah. Perhaps we could also consider creating a feedback form for customers." She accepted the suggestion, and we combined our ideas. That meeting taught me that the way you express disagreement can make teamwork much stronger. Let's move to another daily life example. Imagine you are in a restaurant with your husband or wife. The waiter comes and asks, "Are you ready to order?" You might reply, "Yes, we would like some grilled chicken with rice. Please." Adding please and thank you may sound small, but they make your communication smoother and more natural. One time, I went to a restaurant with my husband. The waiter looked very tired, probably because it was a busy evening. After we finished eating, I told him, "Thank you for your service. Everything was delicious." His face brightened up, and he even brought us free tea as a gift. A few simple words made a big difference. Now let's think about another useful situation. Imagine you are shopping in a market. You see an item you like, but you are not sure about the price. You can say, "Excuse me, how much does this cost?" If you think it is too expensive, you might say politely, "Is there any discount available?" This shows how you can negotiate without sounding rude. I remember once when I visited a local market in another city. I saw a beautiful handmade basket, but the seller asked for a high price. Instead of arguing, I smiled and said, "It is really nice, but my budget is a little lower. Could you offer me a better price?" He agreed and gave me a discount. Not only did I buy the basket, but we also had a friendly conversation about his craft. This kind of respectful language helps you connect with people. In today's world, conversations are not only face-to-face. We also talk a lot through emails. Writing professional emails is another important skill. For example, when you write to your manager, instead of starting with "Hey," you should say, "Dear Mr. Smith" or "Dear Ms. Taylor." At the end, instead of just writing your name, you can add "Best regards" or "Sincerely." These small details show professionalism and respect. I once had a student who used to write emails to his manager starting with "Hi, boss." His manager told him it sounded too casual. After learning some formal phrases, he started his emails with "Dear Mr. Johnson" and closed with "Kind regards." His manager noticed the improvement and even praised his professionalism. This shows how the right words can change how people see you. Another helpful example is how to ask for clarification. Sometimes in a meeting or in class, you do not understand something clearly. Instead of staying silent, you can say, "Could you please explain that again?" Or, "I am not sure I understood. Could you give an example?" This shows confidence and a willingness to learn. I remember once during my university days, a professor explained a very complex topic. Most of the students stayed silent, but one student, Ahmed, raised his hand and said, "Professor, could you explain that part again with an example?" The professor gave a simple story to explain, and suddenly everyone understood. That day, I realized that asking questions is not a weakness. It is actually a sign of strength. Another important situation we all face is when we need to give directions. Imagine someone stops you on the street and asks, "Excuse me, could you tell me how to get to the train station?" A clear and polite way to respond is, "Yes, go straight ahead for 2 blocks, then turn left. The station will be on your right." Giving directions in a calm and structured way makes it much easier for the other person to understand. I remember one day when I was walking in my city, a tourist named Robert asked me for directions to the Old Town Market. He looked confused with his map, so instead of just pointing, I explained step by step. Go down this street, turn right after the bank, and then follow the road until you see the market entrance. He was so thankful and even said, "You explained it better than my map." That moment showed me how valuable clear communication is. Now let's look at another useful area, making appointments. Imagine you want to see a doctor. When you call the clinic, you can say, "Hello, I would like to book an appointment with Dr. Adams, please." The receptionist might ask, "What day and time would be convenient for you?" You could answer, "Tuesday morning would be great if possible." This type of polite and structured language helps keep the conversation smooth. Once I had to book an appointment with my dentist. At first I said, "I need to see the doctor." The receptionist sounded a little confused. Then I corrected myself and said, "I would like to make an appointment with Dr. Wilson for next Wednesday afternoon, please." Immediately, the receptionist understood and booked the time. From that day, I learned that using complete polite sentences makes communication much easier. Let's also practice small talk, which is very important in English-speaking cultures. Small talk means short, friendly conversations about topics like the weather, travel, or daily life. For example, when you meet your neighbor in the elevator, you can say, "Good morning, how are you today?" They might answer, "I'm doing well, thank you. How about you?" Even though it is a short exchange, it builds friendliness and connection. I once had a neighbor named Mrs. Green. Every morning we met in the hallway, and she always greeted me with, "Beautiful weather today, isn't it?" At first, I thought it was just a habit, but then I realized it made our building feel warmer and friendlier. These small conversations created a sense of community, and I looked forward to seeing her every morning. Another very practical skill is talking about plans. Imagine a friend invites you for dinner, but you are busy. Instead of just saying no, you can say, "Thank you for the invitation, but I already have plans that evening. Could we meet another day?" This shows respect and keeps the relationship strong. One time, my colleague Michael invited me to his house for dinner with his family. Unfortunately, I had already promised to attend my cousin's wedding. Instead of rejecting directly, I said, "Michael, thank you so much for the invitation. I cannot come this time because of a family event, but I would love to visit you next weekend." He smiled and said, "Of course, next weekend works." This showed me how polite refusal can still strengthen relationships. Another situation where English is very useful is when you need help. Imagine you are at the train station and your ticket machine does not work. You can ask someone nearby, "Excuse me, could you help me with this machine?" Or, "Sorry to bother you, but I am not sure how this works." These polite requests are very natural, and often people are happy to help. I remember once when I was traveling in a new city, I could not understand how to use the subway card machine. I asked a man standing near me, "Excuse me, could you please show me how to use this card?" He not only helped me buy the ticket, but also explained which train line I should take. His kindness saved me from a lot of stress. That day I realized that asking for help politely can make strangers into temporary friends. Let's now move into another very common situation, visiting someone's house. When you are invited to someone's home, there are some polite phrases that make a very good impression. When you arrive, you can say, "Thank you for inviting me. Your home is beautiful. When you leave, you can say, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the evening. These simple phrases show respect and appreciation. I remember once when I was invited to dinner at my friend Daniel's house. His wife Anna cooked a wonderful meal. Instead of just eating and leaving, I told them, thank you for such a warm evening. Everything was delicious. They smiled and told me I was always welcome. Later, Daniel told me that my words made them feel appreciated. That experience taught me that compliments and gratitude create stronger friendships. Now let's talk about giving advice. Sometimes your friend or colleague may come to you with a problem. Instead of saying, do this, you can use softer language like, maybe you could try, or one option might be. For example, if your friend says, I feel nervous before giving a presentation, you could respond, maybe you could practice in front of a mirror or record yourself first. This style of speaking is encouraging and polite. I once had a student named Kareem who was very shy about speaking English in front of the class. Instead of telling him directly, you must speak loudly, I said, maybe you could try practicing with a friend first, and then you will feel more confident. He followed the advice, and a week later he gave a short presentation. His confidence grew because the advice sounded supportive, not strict. Let's imagine another scenario, when something goes wrong and you need to apologize. In English, apologies are very important. You can say, I am sorry for the mistake, or I apologize for the delay. If it is a bigger issue, you can add, thank you for your understanding. For example, if you arrive late to a meeting, you could say, I apologize for being late. There was heavy traffic on the way. I remember once when I missed an important call with my colleague Rachel. Instead of making excuses, I called her back and said, Rachel, I am sorry I missed your call earlier. Thank you for waiting. She appreciated the honesty, and we continued our work without any problem. That moment reminded me that apologies can repair relationships quickly if they are sincere. Let's move on to talking about achievements. In English, people often share good news with each other, and it is polite to congratulate them. For example, if someone says, I got promoted at work, you can respond, congratulations, that's wonderful news. If someone says, my son graduated from university, you can say, that's a great achievement, you must be proud. These expressions show kindness and interest. I once had a colleague named Peter who received an award for excellent service in our company. During the celebration, instead of just saying, good job, I told him, congratulations, Peter. You truly deserve this recognition. His face lit up, and he told me that my words meant a lot. Sometimes, a few encouraging sentences can create powerful motivation. Another useful situation is expressing gratitude when someone helps you. Instead of only saying thanks, you can say, I really appreciate your help, or that was very kind of you. These phrases sound warmer and more genuine. I remember when my neighbor, Mr. Ahmed, helped me carry heavy bags up the stairs. At first I said, thank you. Then I added, I really appreciate your kindness. It means a lot. He smiled and said, anytime. From that day, our relationship became more friendly because of those words. Let's practice another situation, describing your daily routine. This is a simple but very common topic in English conversations. For example, you can say, I usually wake up at 7 o'clock, then I have breakfast with my family. After that, I go to work by bus. Adding time phrases like usually, after that, and in the evening makes your routine sound natural. I once had a student named Fatima who struggled to explain her daily routine in English. She used to say only, I wake up, I go to work, I eat dinner. I encouraged her to expand the sentences by adding details. I usually wake up at 6. I drink tea, and then I take my children to school before work. Within a week, her English sounded more fluent and interesting. Now let's think about handling complaints politely. Imagine you are in a hotel and your room is not clean. Instead of shouting, you can say, excuse me, my room does not seem to be ready. Could someone please check it? This way you show respect while also asking for a solution. I once stayed in a hotel where the air conditioner did not work. I went to the reception and said, Excuse me, the air conditioner in my room is not working properly. Could you send someone to check it? They immediately sent a technician, and the problem was solved. Because I was polite, the staff even offered me free breakfast the next morning. That showed me the power of respectful complaints. Another very common area is talking about health. When someone is sick, it is kind to say, "I hope you feel better soon," or "take care of yourself." When you talk to a doctor, you might say, "I have had a headache for 2 days," or "I feel very tired lately." Describing your health clearly is important for good communication. I remember when my friend Sophia was not feeling well. Instead of just saying, "Get better," I told her, "I hope you feel stronger soon, and if you need anything, let me know." She said those words gave her comfort and made her feel cared for. Sometimes thoughtful language is as powerful as medicine. Let's also look at giving compliments. Compliments help build positive relationships. For example, you can say, "You did a great job on that project," or "Your presentation was very clear." Compliments are not only for appearance, but also for skills and effort. Once, my colleague Elena prepared a report that was very detailed and clear. After the meeting, I told her, "Elena, your report was excellent. It helped me understand the project much better." She thanked me and later told me that my words motivated her to work even harder. That taught me that genuine compliments encourage people more than criticism. Now let's talk about asking for permission. You can say, "May I open the window?" Or "Is it okay if I sit here?" These polite forms are very common in everyday life. I remember being in a crowded library once. A student named Omar wanted to plug in his laptop charger. Instead of just doing it, he asked me, "Excuse me, is it okay if I use this plug?" I smiled and said, "Of course." His politeness made the environment friendly and respectful. That small phrase created a positive interaction. Another useful example is offering help. You can say, "Can I help you with that?" Or "Would you like me to carry this for you?" Offering help makes you sound kind and supportive. One time, I was at the supermarket and a woman was struggling to carry 2 heavy bags. A young man said, "Excuse me, can I help you with those bags?" She accepted and he carried them to her car. She thanked him many times and you could see how grateful she was. That small act of kindness combined with polite language made a big difference. Let's also consider the language of encouragement. For example, if someone is worried, you can say, "Don't worry, you are doing well," or "Keep going, you are making progress." Encouragement helps people feel more confident. I had a student named Ali who often felt his English was not improving. Every week I told him, "Ali, you are improving step by step. Keep practicing and you will see the results." After 3 months, his progress was very clear. Later, he told me that the encouragement kept him motivated. Words of support are powerful tools. Another very practical situation is talking on the phone. On the phone, it is polite to start with, "Hello, this is Natasha speaking. May I speak to Mr. Brown, please?" If the person is not available, you can say, "Could you please leave a message for him?" Telephone language is a little more formal than face-to-face conversation. I remember once when I called a company for information. Instead of saying, "Is the manager there?" I said, "Good afternoon, this is Natasha. May I please speak with Mr. Stevens?" The receptionist answered politely and connected me quickly. I realized that structured language makes communication smoother, especially on the phone. Let's move to another area, describing experiences. For example, if someone asks about your weekend, you can say, "I went to visit my parents, and we had a wonderful time together." Adding feelings makes your description more interesting. I felt relaxed and happy. I once went on a short trip to a small village with my husband. Instead of just saying, "It was nice," I explained, "We visited a small farm, ate fresh fruit, and walked by the river." I felt peaceful and connected to nature. People listened with interest, and the conversation continued naturally. Describing experiences in detail helps you connect with others. Another skill is expressing preferences. You can say, "I prefer tea to coffee," or "I would rather read at home than go out." These expressions are useful in many conversations. I remember when my colleague John asked me, Do you prefer working in the office or from home? I replied, I prefer the office because I enjoy face-to-face communication, but sometimes I like the flexibility of working from home. This gave a balanced and thoughtful answer instead of just one word. Let's also look at how to show agreement. You can say, I completely agree with you, or, that's true, I feel the same way. If you partly agree, you can say, I see your point, but maybe we should also consider another option. During one team discussion, my colleague Maria suggested a new way to manage our schedule. I said, I see your point, Maria. It could save us time, but we should also think about how it affects our budget. She appreciated that I agreed, but also added another perspective. This type of balanced language is very useful in discussions. Another practical part of English is showing interest in others. You can ask, how was your day? Or, what did you do last weekend? These small questions show that you care. I remember meeting my colleague David on Monday mornings. I always asked him, how was your weekend? At first, he gave short answers, but later he started sharing more details about his family and hobbies. Our conversations became deeper simply because of that small question. Now let's think about the language of invitations. You can say, would you like to join us for dinner? Or, we are having a picnic this Saturday, would you like to come? Invitations make relationships warmer. I once invited my neighbor, Mrs. Lee, to join us for tea. Instead of just saying, come to my house, I said, Mrs. Lee, would you like to join us for tea tomorrow afternoon? She was very happy and later told me that the polite invitation made her feel respected. That small difference in words created a stronger friendship. Another useful situation is expressing opinions. You can say, in my opinion, or I believe that. For example, in my opinion, learning languages is one of the best ways to understand different cultures. This makes your speech sound thoughtful. I once joined a community discussion about public parks. When it was my turn to speak, I said, in my opinion, parks are very important for families and children because they give us a safe place to relax. People nodded in agreement. Using in my opinion gave my statement more structure and respect. Another helpful example is expressing surprise. You can say, really? That's interesting? Or, I did not expect that. These phrases keep the conversation alive. I remember when my colleague told me he had run a marathon. I was surprised and I said, really? That's impressive. How long did it take you? He smiled and explained. My expression of surprise encouraged him to share more details. Let's now focus on discussing hobbies and interests. Talking about hobbies is a very common conversation topic in English, and it helps build connection with others. For example, you can say, I enjoy painting in my free time, or my favorite hobby is cooking traditional dishes. Adding details about why you like something makes your conversation more engaging. I remember meeting my colleague Daniel during lunch break. He asked me, do you have any hobbies? I replied, yes, I enjoy gardening because it helps me relax and spend time in nature. He was interested and told me he also liked gardening. That simple exchange led to a long conversation about plants, tips for growing vegetables, and even some laughter over a few failed attempts. Sharing hobbies often opens the door to friendly discussions. Another useful situation is giving compliments about someone's work or effort. Instead of just saying, good job, you can say, you did an excellent job on this project. Your attention to detail is impressive. Specific compliments sound more genuine and show that you are paying attention. I once worked with a colleague named Emma. She had prepared a very detailed presentation for a client. I said, Emma, your presentation was very clear, and I appreciate the effort you put into the charts. She smiled and told me that the compliment made her day. Specific recognition encourages people to keep performing well. Let's now consider describing past experiences. When someone asks about an event or trip, you can say, last weekend I went hiking in the mountains. It was challenging but very rewarding. Adding adjectives like challenging and rewarding makes your story more vivid. I remember one weekend when I went hiking with my husband Thomas. We climbed a hill that looked small from a distance, but it turned out to be quite steep. At the top, we had a beautiful view of the city and the river. I described this to a friend by saying it was exhausting, but absolutely breathtaking. My friend was eager to try the hike himself. Descriptive words make your experiences more memorable for others. Next, let's talk about expressing preferences politely in social situations. Instead of saying, "I do not like this," you can say, "I prefer something a little different, thank you." This is especially useful when dining with others or participating in group activities. I once went to a dinner party hosted by my friend Michael. The main dish was seafood, and I am not very comfortable eating fish. Instead of refusing directly, I said, "The seafood looks lovely, but I usually prefer chicken dishes. May I try the chicken option?" Michael was understanding, and everyone appreciated my polite way of expressing preference. This approach keeps the atmosphere friendly. Another important situation is explaining a problem clearly. For example, if your car breaks down, you can call the service center and say, "My car has a problem with the engine. It makes a strange noise when I start it. Could someone help me?" Clear explanations help others understand your situation quickly. I remember a friend named James whose car would not start one morning. Instead of saying vaguely, "My car is not working," he called the service and explained, "The engine makes a rattling sound when I turn the key and the car does not start." The service team understood immediately and sent a mechanic who fixed the problem within an hour. Being specific saves time and avoids confusion. Let's now look at how to share advice politely. If someone asks for your opinion about a personal decision, you can say, "If I were you, I might consider," or "One idea could be to." This approach gives suggestions without sounding bossy. I once had a student named Aisha who was deciding whether to study abroad. Instead of telling her directly what to do, I said, "If I were you, I might consider the universities that offer scholarships first. They could make the decision easier financially." She appreciated the guidance and felt supported in making her own choice. Giving advice carefully shows respect for the other person's independence. Now let's practice expressing gratitude in more formal situations. You can say, I'm grateful for your assistance," or "Thank you very much for your support in this matter." These expressions are common in professional emails, meetings, and official correspondence. I remember writing an email to my manager after receiving guidance on a project. I wrote, "Dear Mr. Thompson, I am very grateful for your assistance and advice. It helped me complete the report accurately and on time." The manager replied with appreciation. Using formal expressions of gratitude strengthens professional relationships. Another useful skill is discussing future plans. You can say, "Next weekend, I am planning to visit my parents," or "In the coming months, I hope to learn a new skill." Adding time phrases like "next weekend" or "in the coming months" makes your sentences clearer and easier to follow. I once shared my travel plans with my colleague Daniel. I said, "Next month, I plan to visit the countryside to relax and take photographs." He responded enthusiastically and shared his own plans. This simple exchange made the conversation engaging, and we even started planning a small photography trip together. Talking about future activities naturally invites others to join the conversation. Let's move on to expressing feelings and emotions. Instead of saying only, "I am happy," you can expand with details. "I feel very happy because I spent quality time with my family today." Similarly, instead of "I am sad," you can say, "I feel a little disappointed because my plans did not work out, but I am hopeful for tomorrow." I remember a conversation with my husband, Thomas. He said, "I am a little stressed because of work deadlines." I replied, "I understand, but you have done your best, and tomorrow will be a better day." Sharing feelings and acknowledging others' emotions makes communication more supportive and empathetic. Now let's discuss how to talk about events or activities in a story-like way. You can start with, "Yesterday I went to a local market. First, I looked at fruits and vegetables, and then I met a friend I had not seen for a long time. Using chronological order like first, then, and finally makes your story easy to follow. I once described a weekend to my colleague Emma. I said, "On Saturday, I went to the park with my husband. First, we walked along the river, then we had a picnic, and finally, we watched the sunset." She listened carefully and asked questions about the picnic snacks. Telling stories in order keeps listeners engaged. Another very practical skill is making requests politely. You can say, "Could you please help me with this task?" Or, "Would you mind checking this document for me?" Polite requests are effective in both personal and professional situations. I remember needing help with a presentation slide. Instead of saying, "Check this for me," I asked my colleague Sarah, "Would you mind reviewing this slide for me? I would appreciate your feedback." She checked it carefully and even suggested improvements. Polite requests often get better responses than direct commands. Let's practice talking about achievements in a humble way. Instead of saying, "I am the best at this," you can say, "I worked hard on this project and I am happy with the results." This way you show confidence but remain modest. I once completed a challenging report at work. When my manager asked, I said, "I worked hard on this project and I am pleased with the results. I hope it meets your expectations." He appreciated my honesty and dedication. Humble language makes your success more approachable to others. Now let's consider asking for clarification in conversation. You can say, "Could you explain what you mean by that?" Or, "I am not sure I understood. Could you give an example?" This is useful in meetings, classes, and daily conversations. During a team discussion, my colleague John explained a new software system. I said, "I am not sure I understood the last step. Could you give an example?" He demonstrated, and the whole team understood better. Asking for clarification shows interest and engagement without embarrassment. Next, we will practice talking about preferences in a group. For example, if someone asks about a preferred place for lunch, you can say, "I would prefer a quiet cafe, but I am open to other suggestions." This balances your own preference with consideration for others. I remember a lunch outing with colleagues. Some preferred fast food, others preferred a quiet cafe. I said, "I would prefer the cafe because it is peaceful, but I am happy to go anywhere that works for everyone." Everyone agreed on the cafe. Polite ways of sharing preferences make group decisions smoother. Another practical topic is talking about weather and environment. You can say, "It is very sunny today, a perfect day for a walk," or "It looks like it might rain later. Better take an umbrella." Adding simple observations makes conversations light and friendly. I remember chatting with my husband Thomas while walking in the park. I said, "The air is fresh today, and the sun feels wonderful." He replied, "Yes, it is perfect for a short hike." Sharing small observations about surroundings is an easy way to keep conversations natural. Let's now practice giving opinions about books or movies in a polite way. You can say, "I found the book very interesting because of the main character's journey," or "The film was engaging, and the plot was unexpected." This shows thoughtful thinking rather than simple approval or disapproval. I once discussed a book with my friend Rachel. I said, "I found the novel very interesting because the author described the city life so vividly." She agreed, and we spent a long time sharing our favorite parts. Expressing reasons behind your opinions makes your conversation richer. Another useful situation is handling misunderstandings politely. You can say, "I think there might be a misunderstanding. Let me explain." Or, "Perhaps I did not explain clearly. Let me clarify." Clear communication prevents conflict. I remember a team meeting where there was confusion about a project deadline. I said, "I think there might be a misunderstanding. The deadline is next Friday, not tomorrow." Everyone understood immediately, and the project continued smoothly. Handling misunderstandings calmly prevents stress and maintains respect. Next, let's talk about planning trips or outings. You can say, "I am planning to visit the mountains this weekend," or "We are thinking about going to the beach. Would you like to join us?" Using future tense and invitations keeps conversations engaging. I once invited my neighbor, Mrs. Lee, for a short weekend trip. I said, "We are planning a picnic near the lake. Would you like to come?" She agreed happily, and it became a memorable outing. Planning with others and including them politely makes your experience enjoyable. Now let's practice talking about experiences with family. You can say, "My husband and I visited the museum yesterday. It was fascinating to learn about history." Or, "We spent the afternoon cooking together. It was fun and relaxing." Sharing family experiences is a common topic in casual conversations. I remember describing a visit to a science exhibition with my husband, Thomas. I said, "We explored the interactive displays and learned about renewable energy. It was informative and enjoyable." Friends who listened became interested and even planned a visit themselves. Talking about family experiences makes conversations relatable and engaging. Another skill is explaining your daily challenges politely. For example, you can say, "I have a busy schedule today, but I will try to finish this task." Or, "I have many meetings, so I may need some extra time." This communicates your situation clearly, without sounding negative. I once had a busy day with back-to-back meetings. I informed my colleague, "I have several appointments today, but I will complete the report by the end of the day." She appreciated the clarity, and our work proceeded smoothly. Explaining challenges politely keeps communication professional and effective. Let's move on to describing places you visit. You can say, "The park near my house is peaceful and has beautiful flowers." Or, "The cafe downtown has a cozy atmosphere and friendly staff." Using adjectives makes your descriptions lively. Remember visiting a new cafe with my husband, Thomas. I described it to my friend Emma, saying, "The cafe has soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and delicious pastries. It is perfect for reading or chatting." She was eager to visit after my description. Detailed descriptions make your speech engaging. Next, we can practice giving instructions. For example, first boil the water. Then add the pasta and cook for 10 minutes. Or, turn right at the traffic lights and then go straight for 2 blocks. Clear and logical instructions are easy to follow. I once guided my neighbor, Mrs. Green, to assemble a simple bookshelf over a video call. I said, "First, attach the side panels. Next, insert the shelves. And finally, secure the backboard." She completed it successfully and thanked me for the clear instructions. Logical steps make tasks easier to follow. Another practical situation is expressing surprise or interest in what someone says. You can say, "Oh, that sounds amazing," or "I did not know that. Tell me more." These phrases encourage the speaker and make the conversation dynamic. I remember when my colleague Peter told me he had started learning pottery. I replied, "Oh, that sounds amazing. How do you make the shapes?" He explained the process, and we had a long conversation about creative hobbies. Showing interest makes others feel valued. Let's practice giving positive feedback. You can say, "I really like how you solved this problem," or "Your explanation was very clear and helpful." Feedback motivates and builds confidence. I once gave feedback to a student, Lena, after her English presentation. I said, "Lena, your pronunciation was very clear and your ideas were organized. I really liked your work." She smiled and told me she felt more confident for the next presentation. Positive feedback strengthens communication and encourages growth. Another useful skill is making polite suggestions. For example, "Perhaps we could try this approach," or "One idea might be to start with a short introduction." Polite suggestions invite cooperation rather than forcing decisions. I remember a group project where we were unsure about dividing tasks. I said, "Perhaps we could start by assigning roles based on everyone's strengths." The group agreed, and the project went smoothly. Polite suggestions keep teamwork efficient and friendly. Talking about personal achievements is another practical area. You can say, "I completed my course in English last month," or "I managed to finish my project ahead of time." Expressing achievements confidently, but politely shows pride without arrogance. I remember telling my colleague, Emma, about completing a certification. I said, "I finished my course in English and it helped me improve my writing skills." She congratulated me, and we discussed tips for future learning. Sharing achievements encourages others and opens the conversation. Next, let's practice discussing daily routines in detail. You can say, I usually wake up at 6, have breakfast, and go for a short walk before starting work. After work, I cook dinner with my husband, Thomas, and relax by reading. Adding details about activities makes your speech richer. I once explained my routine to a friend who wanted to improve her English. I said, in the morning, I walk in the park, then I prepare breakfast and check my emails. In the evening, I watch a documentary or read a book. She followed the structure and found it easier to talk about her own day. Another useful topic is discussing problems and solutions. You can say, I had trouble with my computer, but I solved it by restarting and updating the system, or I was late because of traffic, but I called to inform my manager. Explaining both problem and solution shows responsibility. I remember my husband, Thomas, had an issue with his phone battery. He said, the battery drains quickly, but I solved it by closing background apps and reducing screen brightness. Sharing solutions makes conversations practical and helpful. Let's practice talking about shopping experiences. You can say, I went to the market yesterday and bought fresh vegetables. The prices were reasonable and the seller was friendly. Or, I purchased a new jacket, and it fits perfectly. Adding opinions and details makes the story engaging. I remember when I visited a local market with my husband. I described the experience to my colleague. We saw fresh fruits, colorful vegetables, and homemade bread. The atmosphere was lively, and we bought some spices for cooking. Detailed descriptions make listeners feel part of your experience. Another practical area is discussing transportation. You can say, I usually take the bus to work, but sometimes I prefer walking when the weather is nice, or the subway is fast, but it can be crowded during peak hours. Talking about transportation is common in daily conversations. I once explained my commute to a new colleague. I said, I take the bus in the morning because it is faster, but I walk in the evening for exercise and relaxation. She found the details helpful and shared her own routine. Discussing daily transportation is a simple way to exchange practical information. Next, let's focus on describing events with chronological order. You can say, first we attended a seminar on technology. Then we had lunch, and finally we visited a museum nearby. This structure makes your narration clear and easy to follow. I remember describing a weekend trip to my neighbor. I said, first we explored the botanical garden, then we had lunch at a small cafe, and finally we walked along the river. She listened carefully and asked questions about each part. Using chronological order makes storytelling smooth and engaging. Now let's practice asking for opinions. You can say, what do you think about this plan? Or do you agree with my suggestion? Asking politely encourages dialogue and makes others feel included. I once proposed a new schedule for our team project. I asked, do you think this timeline is realistic? My colleague replied with suggestions, and we adjusted the plan together. Asking for opinions creates collaboration and mutual respect. Another practical skill is discussing weather preferences. You can say, I like sunny days because they make me feel energetic. Or, I prefer cooler weather for outdoor activities. Adding reasons makes your statements more interesting. I remember telling my husband, Thomas, I enjoy spring because the flowers bloom and the air feels fresh. He agreed. And we planned a short walk in the park. Talking about weather preferences is simple but effective for casual conversations. Next, let's practice polite refusals. You can say, thank you for the offer, but I cannot join this time. Or, I appreciate your invitation, but I have other plans. Polite refusals maintain good relationships. I once received an invitation to a seminar during a busy week. I replied, thank you for inviting me, but I have prior commitments. I hope to attend the next one. The organizer appreciated the polite response, and our relationship remained positive. Let's also practice talking about preferences for food. You can say, I enjoy Italian food because of the flavors, Or I usually prefer home-cooked meals over eating out. Adding reasons makes your preferences clearer and more conversational. I remember explaining my food preferences to a friend. I said, I enjoy homemade pasta because it reminds me of family meals and tastes fresh. She was interested and shared her own favorite recipes. Talking about food preferences can lead to longer, friendly conversations. Let's now discuss learning new skills. Talking about skills is very common, especially in everyday conversations or professional contexts. You can say, I am learning to play the guitar. It is challenging, but I enjoy it. Or, I have been practicing cooking new recipes recently. Including your feelings or difficulties makes the conversation more engaging. I remember my colleague, David, told me he was learning digital photography. He said, I started last month and I am still learning how to adjust the camera settings. I shared my experience with learning painting, saying, it is similar. You have to practice regularly to improve. We ended up exchanging tips, which made both of our learning experiences more enjoyable. Sharing learning experiences is a great way to bond with others. Another important skill is talking about daily responsibilities. You can say, I usually take care of the housework in the morning, and in the evening, I help my husband prepare dinner, or I check emails and plan my day before starting work, including time references like usually, in the evening, or before helps listeners follow your routine. Remember explaining my daily routine to a new neighbor. I said, I wake up early, prepare breakfast for my husband and myself, and then go for a short walk. After that, I start my work from home. She responded with curiosity, and we shared our daily routines. Talking about responsibilities is useful for building connection in casual conversation. Now, let's focus on expressing opinions about current events. You can say, I read an interesting article about renewable energy. In my opinion, it is important for the future. Or, I watched a news report about urban gardening, and I think it can improve city life. Using in my opinion signals that you are sharing a personal viewpoint. I once discussed a new public park initiative with my colleague Emma. I said, in my opinion, creating more green spaces in the city will improve residents' health and happiness. She agreed and added her ideas about community gardens. Sharing opinions on current events encourages discussion and helps improve language skills. Another useful topic is talking about technology. You can say, I recently started using a smart home system. It helps me control lights and temperature from my phone. Or, I find video conferencing very convenient for meetings. Adding opinions about usefulness makes your conversation relatable. I remember my husband, Thomas, bought a new smartwatch. I said, it seems very practical, especially for tracking your daily steps and sleep patterns. He agreed, and we spent time exploring features together. Discussing technology experiences can lead to helpful tips and shared discoveries. Let's now practice explaining processes. For example, first you chop the vegetables. Then you boil water and add them to the pot. Finally, cook for 20 minutes and serve. Using sequential words like first, then, and finally helps others understand instructions clearly. I once helped my neighbor, Mrs. Green, prepare a traditional dish over video call. I said, first, slice the chicken, then marinate it for 30 minutes. Next, heat the pan and cook the chicken evenly. She followed my instructions carefully, and the dish turned out perfectly. Explaining processes clearly improves understanding and prevents mistakes. Another practical skill is discussing travel plans. You can say, next month I am planning to visit the countryside. I want to explore the forests and take photographs. Or, I will travel to the mountains this weekend to relax and enjoy nature. Including purpose and details makes your plans interesting. I remember sharing my weekend trip plans with my colleague Emma. I said, I plan to go to the lake near the village. I hope to take pictures and try some local food. She shared her experiences, and we exchanged tips for trips. Talking about travel experiences encourages conversation and sharing of ideas. Let's move on to giving polite warnings or advice. You can say, be careful with the wet floor, it is slippery. Or, I suggest taking an umbrella. It might rain later. These expressions show concern and consideration for others. I remember guiding my husband, Thomas, during a rainy day in the city. I said, "The sidewalk is slippery, hold my hand." He smiled and appreciated the caution. Giving polite warnings shows attentiveness and care in daily interactions. Another important topic is talking about cultural events. You can say, "I attended a music festival last weekend. The performances were amazing and the crowd was very friendly," or "I visited a local art exhibition and the paintings were inspiring." Sharing cultural experiences makes your conversation lively. I once described a cultural exhibition to my colleague David. I said, "The gallery showcased traditional crafts and modern paintings. I learned a lot about local history and art." He listened attentively and even asked for recommendations. Talking about culture connects people through shared experiences and learning. Now let's practice discussing shopping experiences politely. You can say, "I went to the market yesterday. The fruits were fresh and the prices were fair," or "I bought a new jacket. The staff was very helpful in choosing the right size." Adding opinions and details makes your story engaging. I remember visiting a local shop with my husband. I said, "The store had fresh bread and vegetables. The cashier was friendly and the checkout process was smooth." She responded with curiosity, asking about the prices and selection. Sharing shopping experiences is practical and relatable in daily English conversations. Another practical skill is talking about transportation experiences. You can say, "I usually take the subway to work. It is fast, but it can be crowded during rush hours." Or, "I prefer walking when the weather is nice because it is relaxing and healthy." Including reasons makes your sentences informative and engaging. I once described my commuting routine to my colleague Emma. I said, "I take the bus in the morning because it is convenient, but I enjoy walking in the evening for exercise." She shared her own routine and we compared experiences. Talking about transportation is a simple way to exchange practical information. Let's now focus on giving detailed descriptions of events. You can say, "Yesterday I attended a workshop. First there was a short introduction, then we did interactive exercises, and finally, we discussed the results." Using chronological order makes storytelling easy to follow. I remember explaining a cooking workshop I attended with my husband, Thomas. I said, "First, the instructor explained the recipe. Then we prepared the ingredients and cooked step by step. Finally, we tasted our dishes and shared feedback." Detailed descriptions help others visualize your experiences. Another useful skill is making polite requests. You can say, "Could you help me carry this box?" Or, "Would you mind explaining this point again?" Polite requests are effective in both personal and professional. I remember needing help with a presentation. I asked my colleague Sarah, "Would you mind checking my slides for accuracy?" She reviewed them carefully and gave helpful feedback. Polite requests often receive better cooperation and maintain positive relationships. Next, let's practice discussing achievements and milestones. You can say, "I completed a professional course last month, and it helped me improve my skills." Or, "I managed to organize the family gathering successfully." Sharing achievements inspires others and creates meaningful conversation. I remember telling my colleague, Daniel, about finishing an online course. I said, "I completed the course in project management. It helped me understand planning and organization better." He congratulated me and shared his own learning experiences. Talking about achievements encourages mutual learning. Let's now focus on describing daily routines in a more engaging way. You can say, "I usually wake up at 6, have breakfast with my husband Thomas, and then go for a short walk. After that, I start work from home, and in the evening, we cook dinner together." Including both activities and companions makes the routine more personal. I once explained my daily routine to a new friend. I said, "I wake up early, prepare breakfast, and take a short walk. In the afternoon, I work on my assignments. And in the evening, I enjoy reading or spending time with my husband." Sharing routines with details makes conversations natural and interesting. Another practical topic is discussing challenges and solutions. You can say, I had trouble with my computer, but I solved it by updating the software. Or, I was late to the meeting because of traffic, but I informed my manager in advance. Explaining both problem and solution shows responsibility. I remember my husband Thomas had a problem with his printer. He said, "It is not printing documents properly," but I solved it by reinstalling the driver. Sharing solutions is practical and helpful in conversations. Now let's discuss describing places you visit. You can say, "The park near my house is calm and has beautiful flowers," or "The cafe downtown is cozy," and "The staff is very friendly." Using adjectives makes your description lively and engaging. I remember visiting a new museum with my husband Thomas. I said the exhibits were fascinating and the museum had interactive displays. The guides explained everything clearly. My friend Rachel became interested and planned to visit as well. Descriptive language makes experiences memorable for listeners. Another useful skill is giving step-by-step instructions. You can say first wash the vegetables, then chop them and heat the pan. Finally, add the ingredients and cook for 20 minutes. Logical steps help others understand and follow instructions. I once guided my neighbor, Mrs. Green, in making a traditional dish over video call. I said, first prepare the dough, then fill it with vegetables. Next, cook in the oven for 30 minutes. She completed the recipe successfully and thanked me for clear instructions. Step-by-step guidance ensures accuracy and clarity. Let's now practice talking about travel experiences. You can say, last weekend I went to the mountains with my husband Thomas. We hiked for 3 hours and enjoyed the fresh air. Or, we visited a small village and tried local food. It was a relaxing experience. Including details about location and activities makes the story engaging. I remember describing a short trip to my friend Emma. I said, we walked along the river, visited a local market, and tried homemade cheese. The scenery was beautiful and the people were friendly. She listened with interest and asked questions about the village. Sharing travel experiences brings conversations to life. Another practical topic is discussing plans for the future. You can say, next month, I plan to attend a cooking workshop, or I hope to learn a new language in the coming year. Adding time frames makes your statements clear and understandable. I once shared my plans with my colleague Daniel. I said, next week I am attending a workshop on digital skills. I hope to improve my knowledge and apply it at work. He found the plan useful and suggested resources. Discussing future plans encourages dialogue and idea exchange. Now let's focus on talking about experiences with family members. You can say, I spent the weekend with my husband Thomas. We cooked together and went for a walk in the park. Or, we visited my parents and had a wonderful time sharing stories and food. Including family members adds warmth to your stories. Remember describing a family gathering to my friend Rachel. I said, we celebrated my husband Thomas's birthday. We cooked a special dinner and shared memories. It was a joyful evening. Sharing family experiences makes conversations relatable and engaging. Another useful skill is explaining your preferences in a polite way. You can say, I prefer walking in the morning because it is peaceful, but I enjoy cycling in the evening, or I usually prefer reading at home rather than going out. Providing reasons makes your preferences more understandable. I once shared my exercise routine with my colleague Emma. I said, I prefer morning walks because the air is fresh and it energizes me. In the evening, I sometimes cycle for relaxation. She appreciated the explanation and shared her own routine. Talking about preferences encourages mutual sharing and learning. Next, let's practice discussing health and well-being. You can say, I feel tired today because I worked late last night, or I try to eat healthy and exercise regularly to stay fit. Adding causes or routines makes your sentences more informative. I remember discussing health with my friend David. I said, I feel relaxed today because I went for a walk in the morning. Walking helps me start the day positively. He agreed and shared his morning routine. Talking about well-being creates natural conversation opportunities. Another practical situation is expressing satisfaction with services or experiences. You can say the restaurant provided excellent service and the food was delicious, or the guided tour was very informative and the guide was friendly. Sharing experiences helps others learn and builds conversation. I remember describing a hotel stay to my colleague Emma. I said, the room was clean, the staff was helpful, and breakfast was fresh and tasty. She noted down the details to visit herself. Expressing satisfaction about services is polite and engaging in conversation. Let's also practice asking for advice politely. You can say, could you give me some advice about learning English? Or do you have any tips for preparing a presentation? Asking politely encourages helpful responses. I once asked my colleague Daniel, do you have any advice for improving my writing skills? He shared several techniques and resources. Asking for advice politely builds relationships and shows respect. Now let's focus on expressing curiosity about new topics. You can say, I am curious about renewable energy. Could you explain how it works? Or I am interested in learning about traditional crafts. How are they made? Curiosity keeps conversations dynamic. Let's continue by focusing on expressing curiosity and asking questions naturally. You can say, I am curious about how local markets operate. Could you explain? Or, I would love to know more about your experience learning a new language using polite phrases, like I am curious or I would love to know, invites the other person to share without pressure. Remember speaking with my colleague, Peter, about his hobby of woodworking. I said, I'm curious about how you start a woodworking project. What steps do you follow? He explained the process in detail, and I was fascinated by how much planning goes into it. Asking questions shows genuine interest and encourages detailed responses. Another practical topic is discussing time management. You can say, I try to plan my day in advance so that I can complete my tasks efficiently, or I allocate time for work, exercise, and relaxation. Including reasons for your approach makes your statements more relatable. I once shared my time management strategy with my friend Rachel. I said, I divide my day into blocks, mornings for work, afternoons for errands, and evenings for family time. This helps me stay organized. She adopted a similar method and found it very effective. Sharing practical strategies encourages learning and discussion. Let's now focus on talking about social gatherings. You can say, we had a small dinner party last weekend. Everyone enjoyed the food and we shared interesting stories. Or, I attended a networking event where I met professionals from different industries, including details about people and activities. Makes your description engaging. I remember describing a weekend gathering with my husband, Thomas. To my colleague Emma, I said, we invited a few friends for dinner. We tried new recipes, played board games, and had a lot of fun. She asked questions about the recipes and games, which led to a longer discussion. Talking about social events encourages interaction and shared experiences. Another useful skill is giving advice about practical matters. You can say, if I were you, I would start the project early to avoid last-minute stress, or it might help to make a checklist before traveling. Using conditional phrases like, if I were you softens the advice and makes it polite. I once advised my friend Daniel about organizing his study schedule. I said, if I were you, I would start preparing for exams 2 months in advance. It gives you more time to review. He followed the advice and felt less stressed during exams. Giving considerate advice. Next, let's practice discussing hobbies in detail. You can say, I enjoy gardening because it allows me to connect with nature. Or, I practice yoga regularly. It helps me stay focused and relaxed. Including the benefits of your hobby makes your explanation more engaging. I remember talking about my hobbies with my colleague Sarah. I said, I enjoy painting landscapes because it helps me focus and express my creativity. She shared her own hobby of baking, and we exchanged tips on improving skills. Discussing hobbies deeply allows for richer conversations and personal connections. Another important topic is describing your daily commute. You can say, I usually take the bus in the morning. It takes about 30 minutes, but I enjoy reading during the ride. Or, sometimes I walk to work when the weather is pleasant, which gives me fresh air. Adding reasons makes your description informative and relatable. I once described my commute to my friend Emma. I said, I take the subway in the morning because it is fast, but I enjoy walking in the evening to relax. She compared it with her own commute, and we shared tips to make the journey more comfortable. Talking about commutes creates opportunities for practical exchanges. Let's now focus on describing experiences with food. You can say, I tried a new recipe yesterday. The pasta turned out creamy and flavorful, or we had a traditional dish for dinner, and it was very satisfying. Using descriptive words makes your conversation vivid. I remember cooking a special dinner with my husband, Thomas. I said, the roast chicken we prepared yesterday was juicy and aromatic. The vegetables complemented it perfectly. Friends who listened were curious and asked for the recipe. Sharing food experiences sparks interest and engagement. Another practical area is explaining problems at work or home. You can say, I had an issue with my laptop, but I fixed it by updating the software, or the washing machine was not working, so I called a technician to repair it. Including the solution shows problem-solving skills. I remember my colleague Peter describing a challenge with his office printer. He said, the printer jammed frequently, but I resolved it by cleaning the mechanism and checking the settings. Sharing challenges and solutions demonstrates responsibility and encourages discussion. Next, let's practice talking about plans for leisure time. You can say, this weekend, I plan to visit the local museum and take some photographs, or I hope to spend a relaxing day reading and listening to music. Including specific activities makes your plans more concrete. I once shared my weekend plan with my friend Rachel. I said, I am planning to visit the art gallery and attend a small workshop on pottery. She got interested and suggested visiting together next time. Talking about leisure plans helps build connections and shared experiences. Another useful skill is expressing opinions politely. You can say, in my opinion, the city should invest more in public parks. Or, I believe learning a second. Language opens many opportunities. Using phrases like, in my opinion, or I believe, makes your statement respectful and approachable. I remember discussing city development with my colleague Emma. I said, in my opinion, creating more pedestrian-friendly zones will improve residents' quality of life. She added her thoughts, and we had a constructive conversation. Expressing opinions thoughtfully encourages engagement and mutual understanding. Let's focus now on giving instructions in everyday life. You can say, first open the packet, then pour the contents into boiling water. Cook for 5 minutes and serve. Or turn left at the traffic lights, go straight for 2 blocks, and you will see the cafe on your right. Clear instructions prevent confusion and help others complete tasks easily. I remember guiding my neighbor, Mrs. Green, on assembling a bookshelf. I said, first attach the side panels, then slide in the shelves. Finally, secure the back panel. She followed each step carefully and finished assembling the bookshelf successfully. Giving instructions clearly ensures tasks are completed without mistakes. Another practical topic is discussing personal achievements. You can say, I completed a professional training course last month, which improved my communication skills. Or, I organized a family gathering successfully, and everyone enjoyed it. Including the benefits or outcomes adds depth to your statements. I remember telling my colleague Daniel about finishing a certification course. I said, I completed a course in project management. It helped me plan tasks more efficiently. He congratulated me, and we discussed how learning new skills improves work performance. Sharing achievements encourages dialogue and inspiration. Let's now practice talking about future plans. You can say, next month, I am planning to attend a photography workshop, or I hope to start a new fitness routine in the coming weeks. Including timeframes helps your statements feel concrete and realistic. I once shared my fitness plan with my friend Rachel. I said, "Next week, I'm joining a yoga class with my husband Thomas. It will help us stay active and relieve stress." She was interested and asked questions about the class. Talking about future plans creates anticipation and engagement. Another practical skill is discussing health and daily habits. You can say, "I try to exercise daily to stay healthy," or "I usually go for a walk after dinner to relax." Adding routines or reasons makes the conversation more informative. I remember sharing my wellness routine with my colleague Emma. I said, "I usually do stretching exercises in the morning and go for a short walk in the evening. It helps me stay focused throughout the day." She shared her routine as well, and we exchanged tips. Discussing habits promotes practical and friendly conversation. Let's focus now on describing locations in detail. You can say, "The park near my house has tall trees, colorful flowers, and a peaceful lake." Or, "The cafe downtown is cozy with soft lighting and comfortable chairs." Including sensory details makes your description vivid. I remember visiting a new park with my husband Thomas. I said, "The walking path is lined with oak trees, and the fountain in the center is very calming. The park is perfect for an afternoon stroll." Friends who heard this wanted to visit too. Detailed descriptions allow listeners to visualize your experience. Another useful topic is explaining reasons behind your choices. You can say, "I chose this course because it helps me develop professional skills," or "I prefer walking in the morning because the air is fresh and calm." Including reasons makes your explanations logical and engaging. I remember discussing course options with my colleague Peter. I said, "I chose the digital marketing course because it provides practical skills that I can apply at work." He agreed and shared his own reasons for taking a coding course. Explaining choices encourages discussion and understanding. Next, let's practice talking about events in order. You can say, "Yesterday I went shopping. First I visited the market. Then I went to the bookstore, and finally, I met my friend for coffee." Using sequential words makes the narration clear and organized. I remember describing a weekend outing with my husband Thomas. I said, "First, we explored the botanical garden. Then we had lunch at a small cafe, and finally, we walked along the river." My friend Emma asked questions about each part, which led to a longer, engaging conversation. Sequential narration helps listeners follow your story easily. Another practical area is asking for suggestions politely. You can say, "Could you recommend a good book to read?" Or, "Do you have any ideas for a weekend activity?" Using polite requests encourages others to share their knowledge or experiences. I remember asking my colleague Daniel for advice about books. I said, "Could you recommend a book that improves vocabulary?" He suggested a few titles, and we discussed the reasons for each choice. Asking for suggestions fosters meaningful exchange and learning. Let's now focus on describing experiences with family members. You can say, "My husband Thomas and I visited my parents last weekend. We cooked together and shared stories." Or, "We had a small celebration at home, and everyone enjoyed the food and games." Including companions and activities adds warmth to your narrative. I remember sharing a family trip experience with my friend Rachel. I said, "We traveled to the countryside and spent time hiking, cooking, and enjoying the peaceful environment. It was refreshing." She became interested and asked for travel tips. Sharing family experiences builds connection and interest. Another important skill is giving feedback politely. You can say, "I think your report is very clear, and you presented the ideas well." Or, "Your explanation was easy to follow and informative." Polite feedback encourages improvement without offending. I remember providing feedback to a student, Lena, after her presentation. I said, Lena, your points were well structured and your delivery was confident. I especially liked how you used examples." She felt encouraged and motivated to improve further. Polite feedback nurtures learning and confidence. Next, let's practice talking about environmental observations. You can say, "The air today feels fresh after the rain," or "The park is full of flowers and singing birds." Observing Surroundings encourages casual conversation and attention to detail. I remember walking with my husband Thomas in a city garden. I said, "The roses here are blooming beautifully, and the scent is amazing." He agreed, and we discussed planting similar flowers at home. Describing the environment makes your speech lively and relatable. Another practical topic is discussing problem solving. You can say, "I had an issue with my computer, but I solved it by updating the software," or "We had a scheduling conflict, but we resolved it by adjusting the plan." Including both problem and solution shows thoughtfulness and responsibility. I remember a colleague, Peter, having trouble with a software update. I said, "You can restart the system and check for updates. That usually solves the problem." He followed the advice, and it worked perfectly. Discussing problem solving promotes helpful communication. Let's now focus on discussing daily routines with variety. You can say, "In the morning, I walk in the park with my husband Thomas. After breakfast, I start work and spend the afternoon on errands. In the evening, we cook dinner and relax together." Including multiple activities makes your narration dynamic. I remember sharing my routine with my friend Emma. I said, "I start the day with stretching exercises, then plan my work. And in the evening, I enjoy reading or talking with my husband." She found the routine engaging and asked questions about timing and activities. Detailed routines encourage interactive conversation. Another useful skill is expressing preferences clearly. You can say, "I enjoy reading fiction in the evening because it relaxes me," or "I prefer walking in the morning to start the day energized." Including reasons makes your preferences understandable and relatable. I remember discussing hobbies with my colleague Rachel. I said, "I prefer painting in the evening because the quiet helps me focus." She shared her own preference for jogging in the morning, and we exchanged tips on creating routines. Talking about preferences sparks mutual interest and ideas. Next, let's focus on discussing experiences in social contexts. You can say, "I attended a networking event last week. I met professionals from different industries and learned about new opportunities." Or, "I participated in a charity event, and it was fulfilling to contribute." Sharing experiences encourages conversation and engagement. I remember describing a charity event with my husband Thomas to my friend Emma. I said, "We helped organize a book donation drive. It was rewarding to see children receiving new books and sharing smiles." She was inspired and wanted to participate in similar events. Discussing social experiences fosters connection and inspiration. Another practical area is giving clear explanations in conversations. You can say, "To solve this issue, first check the settings. Then restart the device. Finally, test if it works properly." Step-by-step explanations prevent confusion and make your instructions effective. I remember guiding my colleague Daniel on using a new software tool. I said, "First, open the dashboard. Then select the Settings tab and adjust the options. Finally, save changes and restart the program." He followed my guidance successfully. Clear explanations improve comprehension and confidence. Let's now practice expressing satisfaction with services or experiences. You can say, "The restaurant staff was very attentive, and the food was delicious," or "The guided tour provided insightful information and was very enjoyable." Sharing satisfaction is polite and helps others learn from experiences. I remember describing a hotel stay with my husband Thomas. I said, "The room was spacious, the breakfast buffet was excellent, and the staff was very helpful." Friends listening were curious and asked for recommendations. Sharing positive experiences encourages trust and conversation. Another practical skill is giving polite advice. You can say, "If I were you, I would start preparing early for the presentation," or "It might help to make a checklist before traveling." Conditional phrases make advice considerate and respectful. I remember advising my colleague, Sarah, about a work task. I said, "If I were you, I would organize the files first. It will make the process smoother." She appreciated the advice and applied it successfully. Giving thoughtful guidance strengthens professional relationships. Next, let's focus on describing places in detail. You can say, "The library near my house is quiet with comfortable reading areas and a large collection of books." Or, "The cafe on Main Street has warm lighting, soft music, and friendly staff." Using adjectives creates a vivid picture for listeners. I remember visiting a new botanical garden with my husband Thomas. I said, "The garden has winding paths, exotic flowers, and peaceful benches. It is perfect for a calm afternoon stroll." My friend Emma was eager to visit after hearing the description. Detailed descriptions make conversations vivid and enjoyable. Another useful topic is explaining decisions clearly. You can say, "I chose this course because it aligns with my career goals," or "I decided to walk instead of taking the bus because the weather is pleasant." Providing reasons makes your statements logical and convincing. I remember explaining my decision to take an online photography course to my colleague Peter. I said, "I chose this course because it provides practical skills that I can use for personal projects and work presentations." He found the reasoning clear and interesting. Explaining choices encourages understanding and dialogue. Let's now practice talking about experiences with different activities. You can say, "Last weekend I went hiking with my husband Thomas. We explored a nearby trail, enjoyed the scenery, and took photographs." Or, "We attended a cooking class and learned new recipes." Sharing experiences makes conversations lively and relatable. I remember sharing a cooking workshop experience with my friend Rachel. I said, "We learned to make traditional desserts." The instructor explained every step clearly, and the final dishes were delicious. She was interested and asked for the recipe. Discussing activities creates interactive conversations. Another practical area is discussing hobbies and skills. You can say, "I practice yoga to improve flexibility and reduce stress." Or, "I am learning digital photography, which allows me to capture beautiful moments." Including benefits makes your explanation meaningful. I remember sharing my painting hobby with my colleague Emma. I said, "I enjoy painting landscapes because it helps me relax and express creativity." She shared her own interest in photography, and we exchanged tips. Talking about hobbies promotes engagement and shared learning. Next, let's focus on discussing experiences in social settings. You can say, "I attended a cultural festival where I watched traditional dances and tried local food." Or, "I participated in a charity event, and it was rewarding to help others." Sharing social experiences encourages dialogue. I remember describing a festival I attended with my husband Thomas. I said, "We enjoyed folk music performances, visited craft stalls, and tried handmade snacks. It was lively and colorful." My friend Emma became interested and wanted to join next year. Talking about social experiences builds connection and enthusiasm. Another practical skill is giving clear instructions politely. You can say, "First, wash your hands, then prepare the ingredients. Next, cook on medium heat for 20 minutes, or turn right at the next intersection and continue straight for 2 blocks." Clear steps ensure understanding. I remember guiding my neighbor, Mrs. Green, in preparing a simple dish. I said, "First, cut the vegetables, then heat the pan. Next, add oil and sauté the vegetables." She followed each step and completed the recipe successfully. Clear instructions prevent mistakes and build confidence. Let's continue with talking about achievements. You can say, "I completed an online course last month, which improved my communication skills," or "I organized a successful community event with my friends." Including results or benefits makes the statement engaging. I remember describing a workshop I attended with my husband Thomas. I said, "The workshop helped me understand digital tools better, and I could apply them at work immediately." My friend Rachel was motivated to join similar workshops. Talking about achievements encourages learning and inspiration. Another useful area is discussing daily routines with flexibility. You can say, "In the morning I go for a short walk. After breakfast I work from home, and in the evening I spend time reading or cooking with my husband Thomas." Including varied activities makes your narration dynamic. I remember sharing my routine with my colleague Emma. I said, I usually start my day with meditation, then work for a few hours, and in the evening, I enjoy preparing dinner and relaxing. She found the routine relatable and asked questions about timings. Detailed routines encourage engagement and learning. Another practical skill is talking about transportation experiences. You can say, I usually take the train to work. It is fast, but it can be crowded during peak hours. Or, I enjoy cycling when the weather is nice because it is healthy and refreshing. Including reasons makes your explanation clear. Talking about food experiences is another engaging area for daily conversation. You can say, yesterday I tried a new Italian restaurant. The pasta was creamy, and the dessert was delicious. Or, I like visiting local markets to find fresh vegetables and spices. Sharing food experiences makes conversations lively and relatable. I remember describing a breakfast I had at a small cafe to my colleague Anna. I said, I ordered avocado toast and a latte. The presentation was simple but beautiful, and the flavors were well balanced. She seemed intrigued and asked for the cafe's location. Sharing meals or recipes often sparks curiosity and interaction. Another interesting topic is talking about shopping experiences. You can say, I bought a new pair of shoes that are very comfortable. Or, I went to a bookstore and discovered a few interesting novels. Including details such as comfort, style, or price makes your story richer. I remember narrating a shopping trip to my friend Liam. I said, I was searching for a gift for my sister and found a handmade scarf. It was soft, warm, and perfect for winter. He smiled and mentioned he might look for gifts there as well. Talking about shopping creates relatable and practical dialogue. Discussing weather is simple but very useful in everyday conversations. You can say, it's been raining all week, which makes the streets slippery, or the sun is shining, and it feels warm and comfortable outside. Talking about weather is a good conversation starter and can lead to more extended discussions. I remember telling my neighbor Maria about a rainy day last month. I said, the rain was heavy, so I stayed indoors and read a book. It was peaceful and quiet. She responded by sharing how she enjoyed baking during the same weather. Discussing weather often naturally leads to sharing personal experiences. A practical topic is talking about health and fitness. You can say, I started jogging in the mornings to improve my stamina, or I have a yoga routine that helps me relax after work, including the benefits of the activity makes your statements meaningful. I remember sharing my swimming routine with a friend, James. I said, swimming in the evening helps me clear my mind and strengthens my muscles. He was inspired and mentioned he might try swimming as well. Sharing healthy habits can encourage others to engage in similar routines. Talking about books and reading is another versatile topic. You can say, I recently read a mystery novel that had an unexpected ending, or I enjoy reading biographies because they inspire me. Giving reasons for your preference makes your description more engaging. I remember discussing a historical book with my friend Sarah. I said, the book explored the life of a famous explorer, and it was fascinating to learn about the challenges he faced. She shared a recommendation for another book, which made our conversation more interactive. Another useful skill is talking about movies and television. You can say, I watched a comedy movie last night, and it made me laugh a lot. Or, I am following a series that explores different cultures around the world. Mentioning your reaction helps the listener understand your experience better. I remember explaining a documentary I watched to my colleague Daniel. I said, the documentary showed the daily lives of people in remote villages. It was eye-opening to see their customs and traditions. He became curious and wanted to watch it as well. Talking about films or documentaries can broaden conversations and introduce learning opportunities. Talking about technology is also relevant for everyday conversation. You can say, I recently started using a new phone app that helps organize my tasks, or I upgraded my laptop because it runs faster and improves my productivity, including Reasons for your choices makes your statements more informative. Remember sharing my experience with a new task management app with my friend Lucy. I said, the app sends reminders and helps me track my goals. It has improved my daily routine significantly. She was interested and planned to try the app herself. Discussing technology helps others learn about useful tools. A practical topic is discussing transportation. You can say, I prefer using the metro because it is fast and reliable. Or I sometimes take a bicycle ride through the park to relax. Mentioning advantages or challenges makes the conversation more engaging. Remember telling my colleague, Tom, about my train journey. I said, the train is usually crowded in the morning, but it is efficient and saves a lot of time. He shared his own experience of cycling to work and compared the benefits. Discussing transportation allows sharing practical insights. Talking about learning experiences can be helpful in conversations. You can say, I recently attended a workshop on creative writing, and it was very informative. Or, I am taking an online course in digital marketing to improve my career skills. Sharing learning experiences often encourages others to pursue education or personal growth. I remember describing an art workshop I attended to my friend Olivia. I said, the instructor showed several techniques for painting landscapes. I learned how to blend colors effectively. She was inspired and mentioned she would like to attend a similar workshop. Talking about learning experiences promotes motivation and mutual interest. Discussing events or celebrations is engaging and relatable. You can say, I attended a local music festival and the atmosphere was lively. Or I joined a community gathering where we shared stories and homemade dishes. Including your feelings or reactions makes the narration more vivid. Remember talking about a festival I visited with my friend Michael. I said, the festival had colorful decorations, street performers, and food stalls. It was vibrant and exciting. He was curious and asked about the schedule for the next year. Discussing events encourages interaction and excitement. Talking about work and professional life is also important. You can say, I had a productive day at work, completing all my assignments on time, or I attended a team meeting where we discussed new strategies. Sharing details about your workday makes conversations more meaningful and informative. Remember explaining a project. I managed to my colleague Anna. I said, I coordinated with different teams, organized the schedule, and ensured all tasks were completed efficiently. She asked about the challenges I faced, which led to a longer interactive discussion. Discussing work experiences allows exchanging ideas and solutions. Another useful topic is discussing hobbies that involve creativity. You can say, I enjoy gardening because it helps me relax and beautify my surroundings, or I like learning calligraphy because it improves my focus and patience. Sharing hobbies encourages others to explore new activities. I remember sharing my experience of starting a small herb garden with my friend Julia. I said, planting herbs like basil and mint is satisfying. Watching them grow daily brings joy. She became interested and asked for tips on starting her own garden. Discussing creative hobbies inspires curiosity and practical engagement. Talking about travel experiences can also enrich conversations. You can say, I visited a historic town last month and explored its museums and old streets. Or, I took a short trip to the countryside, enjoying fresh air and quiet surroundings. Including sensory details makes your narration vivid. I remember describing a visit to a coastal town to my friend Daniel. I said, the town had charming streets, a beautiful lighthouse, and fresh seafood. Walking along the beach was refreshing. He was excited to visit a similar place himself. Discussing travel experiences often sparks recommendations and shared stories. Talking about cultural experiences is engaging. You can say, I attended a traditional dance performance, and the costumes were colorful and elaborate. Or, I joined a cooking class that focused on local cuisine. Including personal reactions makes the conversation more lively. I remember telling my friend, Rachel, about a cultural workshop I attended. I said, the workshop allowed me to learn traditional crafts. It was fascinating to see the intricate techniques used. She showed interest and asked for the next available session. Sharing cultural experiences encourages curiosity and dialogue. Discussing challenges and how you overcame them is also helpful. You can say, I struggled with public speaking initially, but attending a workshop helped me improve my confidence. Or, learning a new language was difficult, but regular practice made it easier. Sharing challenges humanizes your conversation and makes it relatable. I remember describing my experience learning a new software program to my colleague Peter. I said, at first I found it complicated, but watching tutorials and practicing daily made me comfortable with it. He shared his own experience, which led to exchanging helpful tips. Discussing challenges fosters empathy and learning. Talking about weekend routines is practical. You can say, on Saturdays, I enjoy taking long walks in the park. Or, on Sundays, I usually read a book and relax at home. Including specific activities makes the routine relatable. I remember sharing my weekend routine with my friend Lisa. I said, I usually start Saturday with a short jog, then visit a local market for fresh produce. It's a great way to start the weekend. She enjoyed hearing about the schedule and shared her own weekend plan. Discussing routines provides relatable content for everyday content. I remember sharing my favorite band with my friend Emma. I said, I like this band because their lyrics are meaningful, and the melodies are relaxing. She shared her favorite artists, which led to exchanging playlists. Discussing music encourages personal expression and connection. Another useful area is talking about volunteering experiences. You can say, I volunteer at a local shelter once a week, or I help organize community cleanup events. Sharing the purpose and your feelings makes your experience meaningful. I remember describing my volunteering at a library to my friend Rachel. I said, I help organize books and assist visitors. It feels rewarding to support the community. She was inspired and asked how she could get involved locally. Talking about volunteering inspires others and creates meaningful dialogue. Discussing outdoor activities is engaging. You can say, I enjoy hiking because it refreshes my mind and strengthens my body, or cycling in the mornings energizes me for the day. Including benefits makes your activity meaningful. I remember sharing my weekend cycling experience with my friend Daniel. I said, I rode along the riverside path and enjoyed the fresh air. It's a great way to start the day. He seemed excited and asked for the route details. Discussing outdoor activities promotes motivation and practical tips. Another practical topic is talking about pets. You can say, I have a dog named Max who is very playful. Or, I enjoy taking care of my cat because it's relaxing and comforting. Including details about behavior or personality makes the conversation more lively. I remember describing my experience with a neighbor's puppy to my friend Lisa. I said, the puppy was energetic and curious. It followed me around while I watered the plants. She laughed and shared stories about her own pets. Talking about animals creates a warm and engaging conversation. Discussing personal projects is also useful. You can say, I am building a small wooden bookshelf at home, or I am learning how to create digital art. Illustrations. Sharing progress and challenges makes the project relatable and interactive. I remember explaining a DIY project to my colleague Anna. I said, I started constructing a small table using wood and simple tools. It required careful measurements and patience. She was interested and asked for guidance to start her own project. Discussing personal projects encourages creativity and shared experiences. Talking about weekend getaways is engaging. You can say, I visited a nearby town for the weekend. We explored local cafes, parks, and historic sites. Or, I went to the mountains for a short trip to enjoy the fresh air. Including details of the experience makes it vivid. I remember describing a weekend trip to my friend Michael. I said, we hiked up a hill, enjoyed panoramic views, and had a picnic by the river. The scenery was breathtaking. He became curious and asked for tips on visiting similar places. Talking about trips promotes travel ideas and engagement. Another practical topic is discussing cultural experiences through food. You can say, I tried traditional dishes from another country, and the flavors were unique, or I learned to cook a local recipe that my family loved. Including reactions makes your experience engaging. I remember sharing my experience cooking a traditional dish from Thailand with my friend Emma. I said, I followed the recipe carefully, and the flavors were spicy, sweet, and sour. It was a new experience. She was intrigued and wanted to try it herself. Talking about cultural food experiences encourages curiosity and shared learning. Discussing simple daily observations is also valuable. You can say, I noticed the sunrise was beautiful this morning, with pink and orange hues, or the streets were quiet today, and it felt peaceful walking outside. Including sensory details makes observations vivid. I remember describing a morning walk to my friend Daniel. I said, the dew on the grass and the fresh air made it a refreshing start to the day. He agreed and shared his own morning routine observations. Talking about simple observations creates easy and relatable conversation topics.